So today's a tough day. 13 years ago, one of the biggest tragedies in the world happened in our country, where 4 planes were hijacked. 2 of them went into the World Trade Center. One of them went into the Pentagon, and the last crashed in Pennsylvania. In all, about 3,000 people, innocent people, passed away way too soon. And even though that day was meant to hurt us, we've only gotten stronger. I think every year people realize how important this day is in our country. People realize how lucky they are to have some great family members come home. I know I am. I know a lot of people that were in the city that day. And unfortunately, I had to lose a family member of mine, but a lot of people came home that day, and I'm blessed to have them. But today I figured, let's not make this day a day of sadness. Let's remember and let's dedicate the show to the families of victims who lost someone in the attacks 13 years ago today. And I figured I'd do that by counting down my top 5 favorite moments where America was hurt, but sports were there to heal for at least a short time. My favorite part about this is that sports are more than just entertainment. They're a way of life. They're there to make us feel like kids. They make us forget about reality. And every time America was hurt, something happened in sports where we forgot about the sad reality surrounding us and surrounding the country. I'm going to start off with number 5, and it's tough to pick 5. I mean, they all can be ranked in number 1 no matter how you put it. But number 5 was probably when David Ortiz took the microphone at Fenway Park after the Boston Marathon bombings. And here's a clip of that speech that he gave. And before I play it, I want you to know there's some harsh language in it, but I feel like that is why this is one of my favorite moments.
This jersey that we wear today, it doesn't say Red Sox. It says Boston. We want to thank you, Mayor Menino, Governor Patrick, the whole police department for the great job that they did this past week. This is our fucking city. And nobody gonna dictate our freedom. Stay strong. Thank you.
I honestly think that's beyond perfect. That is perfect. Even the FCC was extremely happy with his language. I think once he did that, the city of Boston was healed for at least the rest of that game. Probably the rest of the game. And one of my favorite parts about that speech is how he mentions that the jersey does not say Red Sox. Their home jerseys say Red Sox. But that day it said Boston. I think that was very appropriate by the Red Sox. I thought that was very appropriate by David Ortiz to mention that. And then what better way to heal that city by winning the World Series that year? That made everything perfect. You can't script that. You can't make that into a movie. That was perfect. I don't love David Ortiz, but that day I gained a lot of respect for him. I think he was the guy that needed to speak to the city of Boston and the Red Sox fans. And he didn't speak to just the Red Sox fans. He spoke to Boston. He spoke to the country to let them know that that was their city. And he said, no one's going to dictate our freedom. Number 4 on my list happened on May 1st, 2011, and it happened on national TV on Sunday Night Baseball, which makes it even that much more sweeter. And it happened to two big rivals. Osama bin Laden was killed on May 1st, 2011, and the news spread like wildfire in Citizens Bank Park when the Phillies were playing against the Mets. Fans were chanting USA, USA, and the players had no idea why, which makes it hysterical and at the same time unforgettable. Here's a clip from that game.
Now the pitch, and it's line foul into the seats down the third base line. 1 ball, 1 strike, and I'll tell you what's going on. The crowd is chanting USA, and the reason for that is that there are reports circulating. I am not sure if they've yet been confirmed by the White House that Osama bin Laden is dead. How that's happened, we don't know, but this crowd now knows it. It's amazing how things seem so important for the moment, like they did when Ryan Howard batted with the bases loaded. And then if it's true that Osama bin Laden has been captured, killed, or whatever, it just takes you back to that awful, awful day. And you wonder why you get so upset or worked up over a baseball game in the first place.
What a perfect description by WFAN. That game was in the top of the 9th when USA chants started going on. It was 1-1. That's a time where the fans are going crazy. And keep in mind, national TV, Sunday night, fans are already going crazy. And it's awesome how they just pushed it aside. They push it aside, and they realize that their country's more important than one game. And the fact that the players were absolutely clueless, because remember, they don't have phones, they don't have TVs in the dugout. This kind of reminded me like a happier version of when they announced John Lennon died on Monday Night Football. Because remember, that came out of nowhere. When they announced John Lennon was dead on Monday night, everyone was in shock. It was like you were watching a breaking news story. It was that, but a much happier version about our country and about the person why we are mourning today. So that's definitely on my top 5. Because that was a truly amazing moment. That was when 2 rivals came together as one. Now, the next 2 things I'm about to mention, it took me so long to pick what was second and what was third. And honestly, I might change my mind as soon as this episode is over. Just take a listen to the legendary Doc Emmerich.
There is some emotion here that is just waiting to burst out. We know during days like this that prayer is often mentioned, sometimes so often that it might seem just another polite thing to say. But there are people, including some on our crew here, who have said prayers in the belief that it will help not only these here, but everyone else deal with this time. As we wait, the next voice is that of public address announcer here at TD Garden, Jim Martin.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join together and sing loudly with Rene Rancourt as he performs tonight's national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly
I get goosebumps every time I watch that. It's amazing. 17,000 people plus, you would think, at TD Garden in Boston. And I've been there. They're crazy. Those Bruin fans, they're nuts. And to have every single one of them, and I think they were playing the Senators that day. Honestly, probably some Senator fans were singing the national anthem, despite being from Canada. Their singer hardly even got through the first line of the national anthem, and then he stopped. He stopped. He pulls the microphone away from his mouth and lets Boston just rejoice. In case you haven't figured that out, that was after the Boston bombing. Probably, I think that was 2 days after, maybe. It was the Bruins' first home game since the attacks. My favorite part is how the singer just doesn't even continue singing. He knows that the spotlight's not on him. It's on the country. It's on Boston. And just like the Red Sox fans after David Ortiz's speech, these Bruin fans realize that it's just a game. It's just a game. I wish I was at that game. I would have been in tears. I remember the first time I saw that on SportsCenter, I started crying. That was one of the most awesome things I've ever seen. Doc Emmerich with a beautiful intro, realizing how much this game meant to those fans. Not because the Bruins needed a win, but because he said there's emotion that has to be let out. And boy, was it let out. The next clip you're about to listen to is a feature that the Yes Network had, I'd say about a year and a half ago, maybe. Sometime pretty recently. And it talks about my second favorite moment in sports while America was healing. President George Bush's first pitch at Game 3 of the 2001 World Series.
In my opinion, we gave people in New York at least 3 hours to have something to cheer for.
There are so many snapshots that I remember from that World Series. One of them was when George Bush threw out the first pitch.
I remember George Bush throwing out the first pitch, and sitting in the press box, I have to say it was unlike any other time I'd ever sat in the press box, because we were never going to have a situation like that ever again.
You know, we had heard about that the president was coming. It was a really weird day getting into the stadium. There was extra security, obviously, at the time. I remember watching him walk down the hall earlier. He was going to warm up down in the cage to make sure he threw a good pitch.
And I was, loosening up, and Derek Jeter came in, and we had just a little chit-chat, and he said, hey, Mr. President, you going to be throwing from the mound or from the, from in front of the mound? And I said, what do you think, Derek? He said, throw from the mound. I said, okay, I'll throw from the mound. And then as he's walking out the room, he looks over his shoulder and says, but don't bounce it. They'll boo you.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's ceremonial first pitch.
There was so much tension in the ballpark because still the world was kind of in flux.
I walked out on the field, and I mean, the energy and the crowd and the noise was really, really powerful.
It was probably as loud as I've ever heard Yankee Stadium.
Please welcome the President of the United States.
It was a very emotional moment, and my reaction, without even thinking, was to give a thumbs up. I was just feeding off the crowd and collect my senses, and wound up and fired the pitch.
Wines kicks and delivers to Todd Green in a perfect strike as he gets a thunderous ovation here at Yankee Stadium.
I remember Bush throwing a perfect pitch.
He threw that pitch and he threw a strike, and he just showed everybody, you know what, we might be down, but we're not out.
Was almost happy that it was over, just to see him walk off the field safely, but just that feeling of pride of there's our president. He's out in the middle of the field, out in the open, in front of everybody.
I think a lot of people were proud about that moment and very happy that occurred, and also I just think ready to see some baseball.
We're not afraid, and we're going to continue our lives, and we're going to do things the way we've always done them. And I'm going to stand here and I'm going to throw a strike from the pitching rubber. That was unbelievable.
He came, he did what he needed to do. He showed a bit of strength to the people who were there and to the rest of the country. And then it was time to play ball.
Michael Kay and Jack Curry basically took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, you can't have a better scenario. George Bush, the president of the United States at the time, where the greatest tragedy in American history occurred not even 2 months ago. That was on October 30th. So a month and a half, basically. And he says that he's going to throw from the mound. Actually, Derek Jeter told him to throw from the mound. And he did. And he threw a strike. Honestly, if he threw one in the dirt, this wouldn't even be on the list right now. He threw a perfect strike. And I think that pitch alone and him standing on the mound, he pauses and just gives a thumbs up to 56,000 people. He said, "We're down but not out." And that's what Michael Kay said. That's what George Bush said with his thumbs up and with this perfect pitch right down the middle. I didn't put the clip in, but they were talking about how there were snipers in the upper deck and how there was so much extra security and how the country was still really, really vulnerable at this time. People were still scared to walk out in the middle of the street because who knew when another attack was going to happen? But once that pitch was thrown, all was safe for a little while. And I know it's a little hard to feel the emotion over an audio clip, but when you can, go to YouTube, type in George Bush first pitch World Series. And I promise you're going to get chills, especially on a day like today, on September 11th, you're going to get chills. It's unbelievable. If you haven't watched it ever, you need to watch it because it's simply awesome. And now the moment we are all waiting for, my favorite moment in sports when America was healing. And talking about it, I get choked up. I get choked up. I have chills right now. Just one of my favorite players of all time was in the moment where I get goosebumps every time I watch it. It can be on 9/11. It can be on Veterans Day. It can be on Memorial Day. It can be a hot summer day in August. Every time I watch it, I get chills. Unfortunately, obviously, you can't watch the video via an episode of a podcast, but I have a video clip, and it's not going to do it justice, but I urge you, when you get a chance, watch it. This was when Mike Piazza hit the game-winning home run in the bottom of the 8th inning, 12 days after 9/11. Take a listen.
Lopez wants it away. And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
There aren't any USA chants. There aren't any presidents at the game. But this tops my list. And I don't think anything will come close. This was the first Met game, and I think the first game to happen in New York, because I don't remember when the Yankees played after 9/11, but I know it was definitely the first Met game. Because remember, MLB was suspended. The play suspended for a little while. So this is the first Mets game back at Shea Stadium since the attacks, 12 days later. And the announcer said it. This place was waiting to scream and shout all night. 3,000 innocent lives were taken 12 days before that. But Mike Piazza's home run let everyone just forget about that for a little while. And it's so perfect. It happened in New York. It happened to the Mets, who were in the World Series the year prior. And I'm pretty sure they made the postseason that year. And Mike Piazza, arguably the greatest Met of all time, that's a discussion for another day, but he's probably top 5 Mets of all time. You couldn't write a better script. No way. And it was a bomb, too. It was a no-doubter in center field. Absolute no-doubter. This place would have went nuts whether 9/11 happened or not, because it was against the Braves, which is a big rival. It happened in the bottom of the 8th. So the emotion that was let out made it so much more special. That was the loudest I've heard Shea Stadium ever, I think. That, and probably when the Mets made the World Series a couple times, they were jumping for joy, but I think that tops it. And if you haven't watched that, please, you have to watch it. Met fan, Yankee fan, Red Sox fan, I don't care who you root for, you have to watch it. That home run is the epitome of when the world stops. The world froze. We forgot about reality, and we felt like kids again. That home run wasn't a Mets home run. That was a home run for the country. If you watch the clip, you see Met fans waving their flags. You hardly see any of them hugging each other and screaming, like, let's go Mets, let's go Mets. Everyone's waving their small little American flag. And when you watch the clip, even if you listen to it, the announcer of that game, he did not say anything until after the home run was hit. He just let the crowd go crazy. And I think as an announcer, that was perfect. And there are times where announcers have done that. When Mariano pitches final inning, Michael Kay and the rest of the Yes Network was silent, and they let the moment happen. This announcer let the moment happen, which made it even that much more special. I know a couple Met fans who watched that game live, and they say when that home run was hit, they were in tears. That moment just touched so many hearts in New York, in America. And that's why it tops my list. Well, that about does it for this episode. Thanks a lot for tuning in. As someone who lost a family member in 9/11, it means a lot this day, and you listening to this podcast, this episode meant a lot to me. And I'm sure it means a lot to all of you, because whether you lost someone or not, this day hurts everyone in America. Let's not forget, this was a day to make us weak, but we've only come back stronger. Remember, it's not goodbye, and see you later. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.